What's up? Hope you're doing well. I'm doing pretty good. This video, I'm just going to kind of free flow talk about cards. If you don't want to hear that, well, I'm sorry. Go watch another video. I do apologize, but I feel like talking about this today. I feel like kind of talking about it because it's been something I've been looking at and been thinking about for a little bit, right? I'm looking at binders. I'm kind of thinking, Sword and Shield basically done, Scarlet and Violet basically coming up and all that stuff. Thinking about the new cards that are going to be in Scarlet and Violet. Thinking about the ones we currently have. And then I was thinking back to like Sun and Moon as well, which was another set I was completely a part of. Did the entire run for it. And basically I'm at another set, Sword and Shield, where it's like, fuck, we're almost done with this one. We're almost completely done with Sword and Shield at this point. It's just like, man, where's the time gone? Where are the cards gone? Where's all that stuff gone? And I kind of was looking back a little bit further, like Sword and Shield, like year one Sword and Shield especially fascinates me. It's like the craziest stuff to like look back and just check out what people were so content with getting versus like year two, year three of Sword and Shield. And then I looked back at Sun and Moon and I was like, well, it's not really too different when you look at it the same way. When you take the sets, you lay the fuckers down, and you actually see what the cards look like. In fact, I actually did a comparison for the full art trainers like way back when on Instagram, and it's kind of scary how similar the sets can be, especially when you consider the fact that, the Sun and Moon base sets, they of course had a Sun and Moon Pokemon, but then they of course had like an old Pokemon that you're familiar with. For Sun and Moon base, it was Espeon and Umbreon. They had those ones, and it was the same in Japanese. And then for English, whenever it came down to that stuff, they brought those over. But then for Sword and Shield, they had, what was it, Snorlax and Lapras. That's right. So they brought over two big Pokemon. So there was other Pokemon in the set, obviously, but they had four big Pokemon. It was Morpeko, Stonjourner, Lapras, and Snorlax. And I say big because they also had a VMAX feature in that set, right? It blows my mind looking back at that and just looking at what we were cool with versus what we actually have now. And it's kind of nuts. And a lot of people say like older, like first year Sun and Moon, first year Sword and Shield are kind of basic. And I mean, they're not wrong. It kind of is basic whenever you look back at the cards. But I don't necessarily think that's like a super bad thing. I kind of just want to discuss how like similar these sets are and like kind of the things they did different, because Sun and Moon, Sword and Shield, they are very similar. They did do some different shit between the two, but it's kind of nuts how crazy and how fucking weird like some of the sets got with how crazy similar they could have been sometimes. I'm just gonna fucking roll into it.
I never got a sword. I only got the holder.
Oh boy, Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield year one. Good times and really divisive times on especially how with people feel about the TCGs, with people who were actually in it and collected it at the time versus people who kind of look back at it. Maybe some people came into the TCG and they kind of look at them and they didn't really experience them, but they kind of look at what we have now versus like what we have then, and they look at them and then like try to compare. You can do that, but you got to compare them year by year. So year one Sword and Shield, year one Sun and Moon. Once again, just my opinion. If you don't like it, feel free to go listen to somebody else. I'm just going to kind of free flow talk about this stuff. I don't really have a major overlaying point. I just was looking at my binders and want to talk about it. So Sun and Moon is going to go from Sun and Moon base all the way up to Crimson Invasion. Crimson Invasion is a set that a lot of people just kind of look at like it's a piece of shit. Like they kind of go like, oh, that set. It's not uncommon. It's a very common thing to look at. And honestly, I'm kind of guilty of it too, especially with like how little of it I actually like enjoyed when I opened it. And it's not necessarily so much because the set stinks or anything like that. It's just, it was kind of lackluster to end a year on, you know what I mean? Especially when the previous set of year one for Sun and Moon, I believe that's when Shining Legends came out. I'll double check that, but Shining Legends was a pretty dope set, and it actually capitalized on a lot of different things. It had like fan favorite Pokemon like Entei and Mewtwo, and it's just straight up brought back Shining Pokemon, which was a fan favorite back in the day. And I feel like that set was super dope. And then before that, you even you had the hype that was Burning Shadows. Burning Shadows had Charizard GX in it. Yeah, the Rainbow Charizard GX. People talk about that card still to this day. So, I mean, you talk about hype. Before that, Guardians Rising, I believe, was a set. And it was cool. It had some good stuff in it. And then not Sword and Shield, Jesus Christ. Sun and Moon Base was the set that came out before that, and it had pretty good cards in it, but a lot of people were really pumped about the Umbreon and Espeon GXs in there, especially with the addition of the Hyper Rares, the Rainbows, and stuff like that. Sun and Moon was the first set to do that, and just looking through that, it kind of just didn't end super well for Sun and Moon. It started out great, and it went all the way through and did amazing things. Now, Crimson Invasion was pretty playable at the time. There were some pretty good cards in that set. The Gyarados was a pretty good one. I remember people just liking anyway. And then I think a lot of people are just kind of turned off by the Ultra Beast. I do think Crimson Invasion had a lot of Ultra Beast featured, and a lot of people just aren't like really up to them. It's super hit or miss. I think people are going to kind of look back on them later and think a good chunk of them are cool, kind of how like Genesect when it first came out. People are like, Pokemon's running out of ideas. And now Genesect's like a pretty fan favorite. Like a lot of people like Genesect. I think people look back at it, they'll warm up. Now compare this to Sword and Shield starting out. Now Sword and Shield coming out whenever it was like first year, it goes all the way to Sword and Shield base up to Vivid Voltage. And Vivid Voltage is a set that I think people look at much, much better. But I really do only think that's because of a couple fucking cards. It's not necessarily a much better set, in my personal opinion. And then when you start going back from there, so let's go Vivid Voltage back like we just did Sun and Moon. So you got Champion's Path. Obviously, people loved that set for two reasons, two very big reasons. I wonder what those two reasons are, but love them or hate them, that shit sold the set, and that had a lot of people. And I kind of think that's when like the Pokemon community changed, was Champion's Path, and it was a lot of people hopping back in for the chance of, pulling like $500 Charizard cards. I really do think so. And then before that, you had, what was the set? It was Rebel Clash. No, Darkness Ablaze. Darkness Ablaze was the set before that first. And Darkness Ablaze did also have a Charizard VMAX in it, which was pretty dope. It definitely doesn't compare, in my personal opinion, to the GX Charizard, but I do understand where people like it. It's a dope card. I'm not going to shit on it or anything like that. And it's okay. I do like them. And it directly compares. You got Burning Shadows, and then you got Darkness Ablaze. And right there, you got two Charizard. I do think it's fucking weird. The immediate next set, though, the immediate next set in Sword and Shield, they're like, oh, fuck it. Let's just blow our whole load right on the table right now. Let's just give them a Rainbow Charizard VMAX, so they didn't have it in the other set. Or let's give them a shiny Charizard, like a shiny Charizard V. And that came out in Japanese later. That was actually the first release of that stuff in English. A lot of people thought that was fake because of how it was released. It kind of like a Charizard was given the whole finger too, kind of be like, hey, fuck you, man. Like it kind of looked like that. And then, so they definitely had a good old Charizard era right there, and that kind of made a lot of people come back into Pokemon for Sword and Shield. After that, you had Rebel Clash going back. Rebel Clash, a lot of people don't like that set. However, that set is extremely playable, and I like that set for a couple different reasons. Number one, it mostly focused on the new Galar Pokemon. It had a lot of new Galar Pokemon in it, and I thought that was really good, especially getting people warmed up to Sword and Shield. The trainers in it were playable. Guzma got swapped out. We got a new Boss's Orders Giovanni in there. It was I think it's a good set. The pull rates may have kind of blown, but I did like what they did with that stuff. I thought it was all right. And then Sword and Shield base, pretty standard stuff. You had the same stuff where they kind of tried to get in old Pokemon to help like soften the blow for the new Pokemon. And of course, they had the front starters right there. They had Zacian, and they had Zamazenta there as well for that stuff. The good old things right there. I think they had Lunala and Solgaleo. Were they in the base? I'll put it up right here. I don't remember if they were base set or not. They were in that time frame. They may have been base set. They might have actually been. I don't remember for Sun and Moon. I'll pull it up right here.
That is correct.
But these sets are pretty good. Once again, the big difference you have between these two sets here is you have GX Pokemon, and then you have V Pokemon over for Sun and Moon as GX, and then you got Sword and Shield for the V Pokemon, right? They kind of function similarly. GX Pokemon still have to evolve from other Pokemon. So you have Charizard GX. You got to play a Charmander. You got to evolve it in Charmeleon. And then you got your Charizard GX that's got to evolve on top of that. All your GXs, for the most part, year one, work that way. And then for Sword and Shield, they just said screw that, and they made all your V Pokemon just basic Pokemon. So you could just have a Zacian V, throw it down on the bench. You didn't have to do anything like that. So for the playability factor, I think that helped out a lot. You're looking at two separate components, though. They kind of work similarly. Your GX have the GX move, and there's only one GX move that can be used per game. Kind of neat, kind of dope, kind of cool stuff. It was like a super powerful move. Once you use it, no more GX moves could be used by you that whole game. You had a GX token you had to like flip over. Neat, cool stuff. V Pokemon just had they were just strong Pokemon. They were just kind of stronger Pokemon, and that was basically it. They didn't have a rule or anything like that, but they could evolve. They could be VMAX Pokemon, kind of to go with the Gigantamax and Dynamax forms that they had in English. So it wasn't like anything kind of weird or anything. It was good. It was fine. A lot of people looking at these first 2 years, I would personally say there's not really too much difference between them, other than Sword and Shield having the really, really big wave of Charizard hype. Yes, Shining Legends had the Mewtwo, and people really wanted that, but it wasn't another Charizard card. It was like, okay, we're going to go Mewtwo now. We're going to have Mewtwo. We're going to have Entei. We're going to have Raichu. We're going to bring back Shining Pokemon. We're going to bring back Mew. Like all that stuff, and personally, I kind of feel like you know, Sun and Moon had that shit a little bit better, at least in the diversity factor when it came to cards. That's just personally me. But the first year between the two of them, I mean, it's kind of up to you how you feel. They're both kind of like just there at this point. And I think Sun and Moon just has that shining legends aspect that kind of helps it out. Okay, year 2. This is where people are going to start getting really divisive and start picking fucking sides whenever it comes to these Pokemon. Especially when it comes to like year 2, Sun and Moon versus Sword and Shield. You can lay these out right here. And this is kind of where like they start going in different paths. Not necessarily saying one's better than the other, but I kind of have my opinions about this stuff. So Sun and Moon, you got Ultra Prism all the way up to Lost Thunder. Now, this is where Pokemon kind of started doing some like gimmicks and stuff like that, but also not really at the same time. This era, they brought in, like, they were focusing a good little bit still on the Ultra Beast, right? I remember that with, like, Ultra Prism especially, but they started doing these things called Prism cards, which are essentially these cards with, like, a Prism diamond on them, and you can only run one Prism card, not one of any type. It's one singular Prism card in your entire deck. Now, these were pretty good playable. A lot of them were actually kind of good, and there were a couple that were just straight up devious. Like the Diancie Prism Star, I remember back in the day, that shit would make or break some decks. Like Diancie powering up your fighting type Pokemon a little bit, nuts. Just giving them that little extra push to actually do some stuff. Making like Pokemon like Buzzwole GX or just standard Buzzwole, just knocking Pokemon out. Just blast them out, especially later on as like Sun and Moon went on. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. But some of them just weren't also that great. Some of them did have some value. The Ditto Prism Star was great, though. Let me talk about that real quick. Straight up, back when I was talking about GX Pokemon, you still needed like to actually evolve them. Like I was saying earlier, you needed Charmander to get the Charizard GX. Ditto could straight up evolve into anything. Like it could evolve into anything. It could actually get that line going straight up immediately. And if you were like trying to build consistency to get your Pokemon GX evolved and up, especially since most of them were like the deck sweepers at the time, that's what you need in your deck. A Ditto Prism Star was amazing. But past that, there was a couple other things I remember, like with cards being pretty playable. Like I remember at this point, you had the Malamar that was like the Psychic Energy Accelerator, and this made Psychic Pokemon really good for a while. You had Zorora GX, which was pretty damn good as well. You just had a lot of good playable cards. I don't really recall at this time anything being that high value for collectors, and I think this is why a lot of people kind of look at this one, and they kind of look at it as mid. Now you got some cards in there that are straight up worth a lot of money, like Ultra Prism's Lily. That card's a pretty good one, especially in English. In Japanese, it's insane, and that's just, Jesus Christ. But in English, it fetches for a pretty penny. Same with like Licia and stuff like that too. Some of these cards are like really good. And a lot of the trainer supporters from this era were really dope. Like the Cynthia that was used here is like, it was a really good staple. This was a very good draw supporter for 6 consistent cards and not really having to discard anything. You basically just had 6 fucking cards. You shuffle them into your deck, your hand to your deck right there, and then you got 6 cards. It was dope. And then just from there, it was a good time for that stuff, but not really so much for value. Now, on the other hand, let's go look at fucking Sword and Shield real quick. This spans from Shining Fates all the way up to, what set was it that came out at the very end of the year? What set was it? What fucking was it? Fusion Strike. Fusion Strike. Of course it's Fusion Strike. You know, everyone has their opinions on Fusion Strike, myself included. But it's Shining Fates all the way up to Fusion Strike. This is going to include Fusion Strike, having, you know, a lot of the stuff like that. So this era of Pokemon for Sword and Shield did something that Sun and Moon did not, and they brought back alt arts. They brought them back. Sun and Moon did have alt arts, but we're not quite there yet, except for one. They had the Mewtwo. Mewtwo was in there, but, well, the mass production of them had not happened yet. But in Sword and Shield, in battle styles, they were just like, oh yeah, fuck it, we're just gonna start pumping out like alt arts again. This was crazy because the actual collector's value for that stuff came back. There were some good collectible cards actually in Shining Fates. You can look at that as just a set full of a bunch of baby shiny and big shiny Pokemon. A lot of them don't really have like a ton of value, but once again, they put a Charizard VMAX in there that was a shiny. It was worth a lot of money. People were pretty excited about that. Collector's value right there, sure, whatever, but it was a fun set for people to open. Had some good trainers, had some good shinies on stuff. Battle styles, that's where it started kicking off, right? Even though people don't like battle styles, that set is integral for collectors and people looking at value, because that's where those motherfuckers brought back the alt arts. And the alt arts are basically versions of VMAX cards or V cards, right? Like they're standard versions of them. So say right here, you got this Urshifu V, pretty good, pretty playable, but then bam, Urshifu V alt art. Same with the VMAX. You got your standard Urshifu VMAX, oh, it's pretty cool, bam, alt art. Check that stuff out. And this kept going all the way through Sword and Shield year 2 with some pretty good ones, like going through Chilling Reign. You had like the Calorexes. You had those pretty dope ones, especially with like little ones sprinkled in there too. You had like the Calorexes, you had like the, you know, the Blissey, a bunch of other Blaziken. You had the Galarian birds were in there, and then of course Evolving Skies, the set that everybody can't just shut the fuck up about. You had Rayquaza, and you had basically all the evolutions having a bunch of alt arts, and these straight up got collectors and investors and everybody back into the swing of Pokemon. Were people still opening Pokemon? Yeah. Were people still profiting off that stuff? Absolutely. But this is where that shit swung full goddamn circle, and everybody was back in it on the collector side of the house. Now, playability, there's still some very playable cards, but you do not hear very many people now talking about the playability of cards in Sword and Shield versus when they did in Sun and Moon Year 2. Sun and Moon Year 2 is a year of playability. That's when a lot of cards were coming out that were winning decks and actually making kids cry with how good your deck fucking was, man. That's when that stuff was. And then Sword and Shield Year 2, it's all about the value, man. It's all about your full art trainers that are valuable. It's all about your fucking alt arts. It's all about Rayquaza, Umbreon, all those good cards that came out, the Calorexes, they all have value. And that's what people are chasing after in this sets. And that's a really big difference and a really big division in the TCG right there. And a lot more people are going to be into the collector side of the house when it comes to collecting cards for money, getting them graded, and getting them slabbed versus playability, which is going to have this kind of weird lopsided divide on what's better, playability of Sun and Moon or the collector's value of Sword and Shield Year 2. But that's really what it comes down to when you're looking at it. They added a lot of stuff in Sword and Shield, and not really a whole lot to Sun and Moon. They were just kind of focusing and sharpening up the GX by adding Prism cards and some other stadiums and stuff like that too to just enhance the playability. But that's what it is. How you feel about it, that's completely up to you. Year 3, though, that's where we'll see how Year 3 ends with Sword and Shield, but I kind of already have an idea of how it's going to play based off of the comparisons that we can see right here in Sun and Moon. All right, we've had our fun. We've had our good little times and stuff, but now we got to talk about the actual domination factor that I feel like is happening in the TCG right now when it comes to comparing Sun and Moon versus Sword and Shield. So this is where mechanics and stuff start getting brought in, and I have to just say right off the bat, I already think I know what's going to happen. I'll probably make an update video when Sword and Shield actually concludes. We're not quite done with it yet, but we do have a good path projected for where Sword and Shield is going to end. I will get to that here in a second. But Sun and Moon, let's go ahead and talk about that juggernaut real quick.
Hey, quit fapping.
Year 3 for Sun and Moon. That starts from Team Up and goes all the way to motherfucking Cosmic Eclipse, baby. Those are some juggernaut sets, man. Especially when people are going through that stuff. So Team Up introduced this new concept called Pokemon GX Tag Teams. I could spend an hour talking about how good, that's how good of a fucking concept tag team Pokemon are. You got one Pokemon on your card. Cool. Fuck that. We don't want that anymore. Boom. You got 2 Pokemon there now. You got Pikachu and Zekrom on there. GX. Monster HP stat. Playable as hell. Super collectible when it comes to their actual rare variations of that stuff. The hyper rare one, the full art, they had like alt arts. They did the alt arts a little bit goofy. I'll get to that here in a second whenever it comes to English. I'll get to that. It's coming. Don't worry. But that's, man, what a novel concept when it actually came down to Sun and Moon, right? So that concept kept going. You had Team Up, you had Unbroken Bonds, you had Detective Pikachu, I think was somewhere in there because the Detective Pikachu movie came out. That was a good little bit of fun. I have everything from that set as well. I've done a little talk about that before. It was okay, but if you missed out on it, it's okay. It's just actual Pokemon from the set itself. And you can honestly super compare that to Pokemon Go, weirdly enough. It's kind of weird how much you can compare it to Pokemon Go, minus a couple of the rarities, just when it comes like hype and stuff like that. So, Unbroken Bonds, and then it kept going past that. It went into, what was the other set after that? It went from Unbroken Bonds to Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me? Why did I forget? Unified Minds, duh. It went to Unified Minds, the Mewtwo's, yep. Went Mewtwo. It was super cool, like the Mewtwo Mew sets. And then, oh my god, so, like, all those sets previously, like all the tag team sets, were good. They were fantastic. You know, you had your Reshiram Charizard for Unbroken Bonds, you had your Mewtwo Mew, you had your Pikachu Zekrom. Bro, nothing is going to prepare you for the next set that they fucking just kicked out, man. Hidden Fates. That's coming from the Shiny GX set from Sun and Moon. This introduced Shiny Pokemon to the United States back when it, like, the GX Shiny Pokemon. In English, it came out, like, the previous year. I think it was 2018 when it came out. 2019, for the English release, Hidden Fates had a bunch of Shiny Pokemon GX to collect, plus a bunch of baby Shinies, plus some trainers, some, like, new variants of, like, trainers that we had collected. And, man, like, you're talking Shiny Evolutions, like Shiny Evolution GX, Shiny Charizard GX, Shiny Ultra Beasts, Shiny fan favorites such as Scizor, Reshiram, you know, I had Darkrai in there, Lucario, Greninja, Articuno. There was just so many good cards to pull in that set. People are still opening that set with, like, fond memories, having the time of their lives. I think PokeRev did a fucking video not that long ago just talking about them. It's just that good of a set. It's that fucking amazing of a set because of how fresh it was for people getting into it. That set brought people back into Pokemon, 110%. Like Shining Fates did too. It was a set that brought some people back in. You don't understand Hidden Fates hype, man. That stuff was nuts, and having gone through it completely, I was working at GameStop also at the time when that set released. There was people coming in constantly asking if we had any Hidden Fates, just coming in over and over and over again asking, and it's like, no, man, I don't have any for you. I'll check the other stores, but even the employees at GameStop were like shoveling that stuff into their pockets, man. They knew what they were sitting on. They knew that that set was history. And then Cosmic Eclipse passed that, man. That was the character card. So in Japanese, Dream League is when they introduce character cards, and you're kind of familiar with them now, I'm sure, if you collect Sun and Moon. It's the ones that have a Pokemon, and then the trainer on in the background, they kind of have a full art portrait on it. This was introduced in Sun and Moon, Dream League, and they blew people's minds, man. Cosmic Eclipse had those on the English side of the house, as well as wrapping up the rest of the tag team era with Blastoise Piplup, Venusaur Snivy, and Charizard Braixen. Those were the cards to get, and that set just blew people's mind as well, and that's how they ended Sun and Moon. Sword and Shield, that's going to take you... I'm sorry, I could just talk about Sun and Moon Year 3. I could do a whole paper on that. I could write a whole college fucking lecture on that stuff. Because that era of Pokemon, they just did so many things right. The tag team gimmick, plus all the stuff they did with Hidden Fates, it's just genius. It's just so fresh, and like looking back on it now, you could put one of those booster boxes, and of course the, product for Pokemon Go, but Detective Pikachu and then Hidden Fates in front of me, just put a couple proc in there, you're sitting with a solid lineup of stuff to open. Like that, I think everybody, even vintage collectors, will open that stuff and look at it, just with what they had. Sword and Shield, you're going through, and you got, Brilliant Star, it went through Astral Radiance, we just had Pokemon Go, and then Lost Origins coming up. And they're still doing the alternate arts, they're still going through that stuff. What they introduced this year, though, is V-Star Pokemon. Now, V-Star is essentially combining V-Max, where you take a V Pokemon, and then instead of putting the V-Max card on it, you throw a V-Star on it. And they added the V-Star rule, which is essentially just the GX rule. You can only use one V-Star move per game. These are just like game-breaking moves, things that you can throw out there. It's a good time. It's not fresh, though. It's not fresh. You're combining two other things. You got GX, and you've got the V-Max, and they're both together. The cards look great. And me having this complaint with like how Sword and Shield's running so far, I am no way bitching about the artists, or the cards, or the arts we're getting. I'm not complaining about that stuff at all. Just how Sword and Shield is being projected now to end. They're talking about doing a V-Star Shiny set, and they're probably going to do another set after that. We're kind of looking into it with Japan. We're getting the new set where it's going to have more character rares, and it's going to have some more cards specifically. I think they're talking about having some full art trainers for that stuff too. But it seems like this era of the TCG is focusing a lot on character rares. Now, that's not a problem. They are very beautiful cards, but the problem is collectors don't give two fucks about them. They don't give two shits about that. And what I mean by that is like the investors and the collectors, people on the slab and stuff like that. See, character rares only really get brought up when people feel like bringing them up, and it usually stems from a sentence where it's like, guys, character rares are pretty underrated. They're pretty undervalued. Let's see why are they so undervalued? And it's the pull rate and stuff like that. They're good cards. They are fantastic, and the art's great. But, like, really the only people that care about them are people that want to, A, fill their binder, and B, appreciate the art. That's really the only people who do anything with that. And on top of that, they're doing the Radiant cards, which are pretty cool. They're kind of like Shining Pokemon, but they're not. They're called Radiant and Sparkling, I think, in Japanese. It's basically the same concept, but they're kind of just rehashing things they did. And I mean, I didn't even talk about amazing rares that they did in year 1 of Pokemon, where they did that, like the Jirachi and the Reshiram. It was all legendary Pokemon, so it was kind of cool. But they're doing a Radiant Jirachi. They had an amazing rare Jirachi, but they had a Prison Star Jirachi too. I can't really say anything. They just really fucking love Jirachi. They like all these little gimmick cards. They love doing it to Jirachi. And sure, whatever. I mean, Jirachi's a cool Pokemon. I just kind of feel like Sword and Shield, especially if they're just going to do a V-Star shiny set like they're talking, it's just rehashed garbage, man. It's just stuff that they've already done, and it's not really, like, super fresh. Like, I mean, like, compare V-Star, which is just combining GX and, you know, the VMAX concept, to motherfucking Tag Team, dog. Like, you don't understand when, like, Tag Team was announced. Like, whenever, like, Team Up and then Tag Bolt for Japanese, where, dude, the hype was real. It was just there. Like, I mean, going from, like, Lost Thunder and, like, things like that, where, I mean, like, yeah, people were still kind of pumped, but, like, watch people that have opened that. You can watch Max for sure. Like, watch him open a box of Lost Thunder versus a box of Team Up, and, like, just watch the amazement and, like, how the life of Pokemon just flows back into him because of what a fucking novel concept that is. Look, I'll probably update this. Maybe Sword and Shield's going to blow our fucking minds. Maybe they're going to come out there. They're going to just be like, guys, we got something real good to end the sets with. Maybe they will. Maybe they will. The character rares, I don't think are going to be, like, that fucking good. I mean, VMAX Climax, nobody really cares about that much. Like, the character rares that came out of that, people will collect them. They'll occasionally post them. But they are not the center of any conversation that anybody has. And I'm very sorry to tell you that. People will throw out character rares before they will, like, team up cards. Before the Tag Team GXs, they will not throw those out. Like, all 32 of those motherfuckers that are beautiful. So many good pairings. They even made people like Ultra Beasts with the Pheromosa and the Buzzswole, man. There's something magical about that. We'll see if Sword and Shield can capitalize on that. But, I mean, overall, comparing the similarities to it, they do have the exact same structure. Just when you look at what they're doing versus what the actual, like, gimmick versus the format is, it's just, there's a reason why people compare them so starkly, because they are very similar. But what they're doing to the actual sets, like when it comes to what they're implementing, it's like night and day, man. It's just a different, they're trying to recapture, I think, what they had with Sun and Moon. Sun and Moon, in my opinion, is better. I really do. I think that. I know people are going to disagree with that strong year 2 for Sword and Shield, just with the reintroduction of the alt arts. But you got to remember, Sun and Moon year 3, you know what they also brought back? Alt arts, baby. Those tag team alt arts, some of those are so underrated. I know why people don't really look at them too highly in English. It's because some of them were released in, like, these products, like, mass produced. They were kind of easily damaged with the product. Dude, Japanese, it's not the same. All those alt arts, minus a couple that were like Pokemon Center promos, those were all in sets, baby. Those were all pullable, and those just, it was so great pulling those in Japanese. But in English, you just looking at the arts for the tag teams, man, I swear to God, they had something really good with that stuff. I wanted to geek out, wanted to just talk about cards, wanted to compare Sun and Moon to Sword and Shield. Maybe some of y'all were not familiar with Sun and Moon and some of the cards there. I highly encourage you to go look at the set list and kind of compare them like I said, you can compare very, very similarly year 1 and year 2 for Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon. Just the way that it's laid out is the same, but the overall card contents and, like, just the implementations they're doing, it's a little bit different, and you can kind of compare what they're doing, but with the same structure already there, you can easily compare these sets. That's all I got. Appreciate it. If you stuck out this long and just heard me geek out about fucking cards, just let me know how you feel about this stuff. I know this is long. I just want to talk, so that's all I got. Let me know. Appreciate anybody who stuck around, and see you later, virgins.